Hey, good morning, everyone. I am super excited to be here this morning. As was already mentioned, I'm Derek. I am one of the pastors just up the road in Boulder at the Well Church in Boulder, and I'm the connections and the student ministry pastor there. I've been there since 2018. It's just a joy and privilege to serve there. And I love taking every opportunity that I can to come here and speak usually a couple times a year here as well and talk to you guys. I've had the privilege to teach here many times, and it's always an honor to do so. I love coming in and seeing what God is doing. I know you guys are like in the middle of like a building initiative and stuff like that. And as somebody who just recently came through that on our church, and we moved into a building after like 7 or 8 years of portable ministry, it's been actually it's more like a 10 years or so of portable ministry before we finally ended up getting into a building. And so I know what that's like. I know the journey you guys are on, and I want to encourage you in that. It will be worth it, all right? It's a lot of work, but it will be worth it. So don't give up and keep being generous, all right? And I promise Pastor Caleb did not ask me to say that. So my family couldn't be here this morning other than my son. He's here with me. My wife and daughter couldn't be here this morning. They're serving in the kids ministry at our church in Boulder, but they were sad that they couldn't make it. They always love coming here and just seeing what God is doing here as well. We're going to be in Psalm chapter 90 this morning, Psalm 90. So if you have your Bibles, I want to encourage you to go ahead and turn there. And while you're turning there, I figured I'd tell you a little bit about myself. Something you should know about me is I'm a dreamer. All right, I'm a dreamer. I always have been a person that has big dreams, has very big vision for my life. I'm a goals-oriented person. I always have like a list of things that I'm trying to accomplish, things that I want to do. And I know some of you are probably like the adventurers that are just like, hey, whatever life throws at me today, I'm ready to just embrace, or kind of spontaneous, spur-of-the-moment people. I'm actually not that person. I'm not that at all. I like to plan. I like to have goals. I like to have checklists. Every single week, the first thing I do when I get into the office is I make a list on a Post-it note of things that I want to accomplish that week, and I try not to add to that Post-it note until everything on the Post-it note has been checked off. Like once the Post-it note's full, that's all I can fit until I start checking some stuff off that box. But that's who I am, all right? And I've always been that way. I am very driven, and I am 40 years old now. Well, actually 41. I'm in my 40s. And when I was in my 20s, my list of things that I wanted to accomplish was pretty massive. I had a big list of goals. I kept them in an Evernote document on my phone, and I would revisit them all the time, all the stuff. How close am I to these goals? I had goals for my family. I had goals for my career. I had goals for just experiences that I wanted to have, like all laid out in this list. And this is a wonderful exercise. I would encourage you guys to do this. But I pulled that, I've since had children, and things have like definitely slowed down in my life. And I pulled this list out the other day and just started looking through it for the first time in a really long time to see, hey, where was my head, 10 plus years ago? What was I thinking about? What were the things that I was really passionate about and wanted to accomplish? Because for a while, I was looking at those and I was like, it's funny, I look back on them now and I'm like, wow, some of those things, like I wanted to baptize both my kids. Checked. Amazing. Like those are some awesome things to experience. There were some travel goals that I had that I was like, hey, I've got to experience some of those things. There were some crazy goals, like I wanted to speak to 10,000 people. I don't know why, and I'm like, wow, that was a hilarious goal to have, and I don't know why that number was so specific. Like I look back on it, I'm like, I don't even know why I wrote that down, but I guess I was like a young person with like some big vision and some big dreams, and so I wrote that down. But my goals were big. That's the point that I'm trying to make. I had some really big goals, and for a long time, I organized my life around them. I visited them regularly. I was running for those things really fast, and then life happened. For a while, I went into a season where I was a broke church planter, and I had like barely money to like scrape by every single month, and that kind of set some of your financial goals to the side when you decide to like take a big step financially for God. Had children, and entered into the phases of life where it's like, man, I'm just trying to manage my schedule with my wife, change diapers, all of the stuff that goes with like having young children that can just easily hijack some of the like initial dreams that you had for a while. Even today, like, and I say that to say like, we all enter these seasons where we might have goals and ideas of what we want to accomplish, and then all of a sudden we're like, man, I'm just in a season of trying to survive. I'm just trying to like make it through this. survive a season of financial struggles, survive a season of work, survive the toddler season. Now my kids are both older, and it's like surviving, trying to find ways to get my kids that are involved in extracurricular activities to 2 different towns at the exact same time. Like those are the things that I wrestle with now. One thing after another tends to sidetrack the goals that we set when we're younger, and a lot of times. And then we find ourselves in our 40s looking back, and we're like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Am I doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing? Am I doing everything that I'm supposed to be accomplishing? And maybe you felt this tension before where you're kind of caught between your dreams and kind of the daily grind of just everyday life and trying to figure out like how to make it work. I work with a lot of young adults in Boulder, and this is something that I see on a regular basis. A lot of times they're fresh out of college. They come to Boulder to work some tech job, and it's their first job out of college. And maybe while they were in college, they were plugged into like a campus ministry. And so like every night of the week, they were hanging out with their Christian friends. They were doing something amazing. They felt like their life had this massive purpose behind it. Spontaneous worship nights, multiple like missions trips every single like year. And then they're coming to me after they've started their first job after a few months, and they're like, is this all there is to life? I wake up, I go to work every day, I come home, I go to bed, I feel like my life is missing purpose. I feel like the things that I used to, like, does God still love me? Because for years, I just like, everything revolved around him, and now I feel like everything just kind of revolves around living, and I don't have the community and the fellowship that I had before. This happens to married couples in the room too. It's like, you know what? I feel like marriage can feel like a grind sometimes if we're just being honest, right? Pay bills, manage schedules, figure things out, raise kids, and there's no breathing room, and you find yourself wondering like, is this all that God has for me? Just kind of the daily thing. This shows up in midlife crises for a lot of people. Just a random midlife divorce that nobody saw coming because it's just like, I just got bored and realized like, I'm in my midlife now, and I just need to like figure out what I really want from life. And they kind of make these like, or maybe it shows up as just a giant purchase. Maybe it's not a divorce, it's just purchasing something that they always wanted to get. Nothing wrong with any of this stuff, by the way. Well, if you're divorcing your wife out of boredom, there is something wrong with that. But I'm talking about like, making purchases, having goals, like chasing after something in midlife. Don't hear me knocking on any of that kind of stuff, okay? The point I'm trying to make is most of us, we look at our lives and we want our lives on this earth to count for something. And sometimes when we're just living in the day-to-day life, it feels like, am I doing what I want? Am I doing the thing that I feel like all of us as humans are supposed to do? We see this when you go to any bookstore. If you look at the best sellers, most of the best-selling books, even in the Christian bookstore, are about our discontentedness, about how there's something more that we're supposed to be chasing after. We have to be praying giant prayers, good things. We have to be going even more radical than we already are in our faith. There's kind of this constant like, I'm not quite doing enough, I'm not accomplishing enough, I'm not making my life count. We see this on social media. Spend some time on Facebook, Instagram, Be Real, whatever your chosen social media platform is. You're seeing everybody's highlight reels and you're comparing your life to theirs and you're like, ugh, am I doing anything that matters? So the question I want to ask is this, is where do we find hope in the midst of all of this like daily life, daily grind that we find ourselves in? In Psalm 90, which is where we're going to be today, we find the only psalm in the Bible written by Moses. So this is a very, very old psalm. It dates back to like the times of like the Pentateuch. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Very old psalm. Most scholars believe that when Moses wrote this would have been during the time when he's wandering around in the wilderness during the Exodus. So he's wandering around in the wilderness, most likely, like think about Moses' life, all right? He has seen God do amazing things, plagues, splitting the Red Sea. And at this point when he writes this, the whole generation that saw that has most likely died off, and he's just wandering around in the wilderness fighting a bunch of wars. That's where we find ourselves in Psalm 90. And in this situation that Moses finds himself in, he writes a psalm that I've gone back to over and over and over again in my life, and it's one of my favorite psalms to read. So let's read this psalm together, okay? Psalm chapter 90, it's not too many verses. He says this, Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust and say, return, O children of man. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it's past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. I promise this is going to be a positive message, all right? We are brought to an end by your anger. All right, where am I? I lost my place. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a scythe. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So, and here's the crux of this psalm. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. What we're going to see today as we dive into Psalm 90 is we're going to see 4 truths with how Moses responds to the situation that he finds himself in, how he responds to this tension between seeing God do amazing things and wandering around in the wilderness in the middle of an exodus with a bunch of people that haven't even seen many of the great things that God accomplished in his younger years. 4 truths from this passage. The first one is this. It's that God is our anchor. God is our anchor. Look again at verse 1 and 2. He says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations, and before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. So Moses, as he's reflecting on this, he doesn't start with himself. He doesn't start with this situation. He doesn't start with his feelings. He starts with God. He starts at just the right place. He says, God, you span all generations. From everlasting to everlasting, you are infinite. He was here before us. He will be here long after us. And in all of these things, he says, you've been our dwelling place. In other words, you've been our home, God. Now, I don't know about you. When I think about what it means to be at home, I think of getting home from work and kicking off the shoes and just sitting down and relaxing a little bit. Like, that's when you know you're at home, right? When you can relax, you can let your guard down. There's no pretending. There's no pretense. You just open up, start talking to your family. You don't have to show off. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. There's no performance. I'm just there. And I am fully me at home, right? And so when we think of God as our home, we don't have to pretend. There's no pretense. There's no hiding things. There's no covering up. We are just relaxed. We are with God. He is our home. He is our dwelling place. Think about this. God knows everything about you. All of your thoughts, all of your deepest secrets, all of your sins, those can be terrifying places. And yet, in the middle of all of that, God loves you anyway. God sent his son for you anyway. And you can have a home in him. He is your dwelling place. But he's not just your dwelling place. It says he's the dwelling place of all generations. He has been a home for all of humanity, which is an amazing thing to think about. He is eternal. And it says here, before the mountains were formed, before the earth was even formed, from everlasting to everlasting, for all of eternity, God has always been. And this God who has always been has a plan. And he is working that plan out. It's a plan that came into place before the foundations of the world, and it's a plan that has always existed. And because it's a plan by someone that is eternal and all-powerful, it is a plan that cannot be thwarted. It can't be stopped. There's no scenario where God's plan doesn't work out. God's going to accomplish his purposes in his time. And I think it's important for us to have an eternal perspective of God because we have a very finite amount of time on this earth, and God is eternal. And he is working things out that he started long before us and will continue to work out long after us. And this should give us a great hope that it's all going to work out. It's all going to work out in the end. And I can rest in the fact that no matter how sidetracked I might feel on my personal goals, no matter how far away from certain things that I once dreamed of I may be, God's purposes are greater than my purposes, and he's going to accomplish what he's going to accomplish. And that's a truth that ultimately, if you cling to, will anchor you It'll anchor you in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, and all the way to your deathbed. That God has a great plan for this world. And even our short 70 to 80 year span on it matters to him and matters for his purposes and matters for his plans. And so when I say God is our anchor, here's what I mean by that. What's the purpose of an anchor on a ship? I think a lot of times when I think of anchors, I think of spending summers on the lake with my in-laws, cast an anchor down so the boat doesn't float away while you're jumping in the water and swimming. But anchors have a much bigger purpose than just keeping a boat from floating away while you're swimming. Anchors in the sea are very, very important. One of the most important parts of the ship. Because when you run into rough waters, you run into high waves, you run into storms, the anchor keeps you from capsizing. The anchor is the thing that keeps you directed the way that you're supposed to go, because the waves will toss you off course like that. And it's the anchor that allows you to be able to steer through the storms and through the rough seas without capsizing, without tipping over. And so when we anchor our lives in God, we're rooted in something that's so much deeper than our finite time on this earth. We are rooted in the Creator. We are rooted in the one who is all-powerful. We are rooted in the one who is eternal. And most people, when they approach life, they approach it very reactionary. Just a series of reactions from the time they enter into adulthood until the time that they die, with very little purpose. And if you think about just the atheistic worldview in general, it's like we're all kind of like here by chance. It's all kind of like a cosmic accident. And if that's your view on life, that can lead to some pretty dark places. It can lead to some depression. There's no purpose for my pain anymore. There's no purpose for when things don't work out. No purpose for my suffering. And yet, the whole reason that you long in the deepest parts of your soul to do something that matters is because you matter. That's why you long for those things. Because God made you to matter. He made you for a purpose. So you have a purpose to begin with. That's why you long to do great things. So we start there. We have to start with God. And that's where Moses starts, which leads to the next reality that Moses points out for us, and that's this, that life is short. Life is short. He grounds us in the reality that God is eternal, but we're not. We have a very finite time on this earth. Verses 3 through 11, we don't have to read them all again, but he talks about how we started as dust and we return to dust. He talks about how we're like grass that grows really fast and the hot midday sun comes out and then it just withers away just as quickly as it sprouted up. It talks about how we have a lot of sin before a holy God. So he talks about our sinfulness. And then he talks about like, man, our life is like 70, 80 years. We're here and then we're gone. And who considers those things? Who stops and thinks about those things? So you can tell that when Moses is writing this, he's having a bit of an emo moment. He's sitting there kind of in his like, man, what is life? What is this life? He spends a lot of time lamenting over a lot of different things as we read this passage, and I promise this is going somewhere that's not depressing. But he's thinking about how short life is. He's like, man, we're alive for 70 to 80 years. We experience a lot of pain during that time. We sin a lot against God during that time, and then we're gone. Like, that's what he says. What he's really doing is he's pointing out a tension that every single one of us feel and every single one of us wrestle with. We want our lives to count. We have grand plans, and yet our hopes and our dreams get sidetracked constantly. They get sidetracked by the busyness of life. They get sidetracked by sin. Sometimes it's our sin that sidetracks it. Sometimes it's sin that's not even in our control. It's other people's sin that sidetracks our lives, sidetracks the plans that we have. Some of our dreams, if we're being realistic, are bigger than are even possible to accomplish in our lifetime. That's just the reality of it. Like, there's this reality that most of us have more dreams for our life and things that we want to accomplish than we have time on this earth. Like, think about Moses as an example of this. You're talking about a guy that does amazing things on the promise of a promised land, and he never gets to enter it. He never even goes into the promised land. This tension that we all feel, if we're not careful, what it can do is it can feel like a flaw to us, like a flaw in our design. Like this must be a cosmic mistake. Because why would God give me things in my life that I want to accomplish that I will never have time to accomplish in this life? But I would actually argue that this feeling isn't a flaw at all. It's by design. God made us this way on purpose. It's a clue. It's not a flaw. It's a clue as to why we were made. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11 tells us that we were made with eternity on our hearts. The God placed eternity on the hearts of all people. And so if you feel like there is more that you want to accomplish in this life than there is life, that's because you were made for eternity. You were made for more. And that's why that's on your heart. And so there will always be more that you want to do or see or experience or accomplish than there is time on this earth, on this side of heaven. This is why C.S. Lewis, he puts this so beautifully. He's one of my favorite theologians. He says, if I find in myself desires with which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another. I was made for another world. So you may feel like you don't have enough time to accomplish everything that you want to accomplish, or like your dreams have been sidetracked, but I want to remind you this morning that God is still at work, and He has placed eternity on your heart for a reason. He is everlasting, and He will work in spite of the brevity of our own lives. And it's important for us to remember that God doesn't leave us with this feeling as a flaw, but as a clue. God doesn't just leave us longing for eternity. He sent Jesus to make our longing for eternity with Him a reality, to meet the ultimate need that we all have, which is to accomplish something eternal and to live eternally and to experience things eternally. Jesus came with a mission to seek and to save the lost by dying on the cross for our sin. And Jesus wasn't sidetracked by His plan. He didn't die early. He died right when He was supposed to accomplish the very thing that He came here to accomplish. And when He came, what did He come for? He came straight for the thing that all of us fear and all of us are running from. He came for death itself, which is an amazing thing to think about. He faced death head on and conquered it so that when we look at our lives and we look at the brevity of our lives, we have nothing to fear. We can face it with the same boldness that Jesus did. And even Jesus was like, God, if there's another way. Like, He was afraid, and yet He faced it. And all of us will one day reach the end of our life, and it will be the final sanctifying process of, do we face death with purpose? Do we face the end of our life with single-hearted devotion to God like Jesus did? This is something all of us will experience, but Jesus did that so that we could experience life beyond death, so that we could experience the reality that our hearts were made for, which is eternity. And so if you've never trusted in Jesus to forgive your sins and give you eternal life, I would just tell you that invitation is open for you today. You can turn from your sin. You can turn to the one who came to this earth and face death head on for you. And then once you have chosen Jesus and you've chosen to follow Jesus, you are free to truly live out the rest of this psalm, okay? So the third truth is this. Wisdom is living with the end in mind. Wisdom is living with the end in mind. This is the crux of this psalm, or the crescendo of Psalm 90. Because God is eternal, and because our life is short, Moses prays this. He says, teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. He's saying, I have a set number of days on this earth. I had better live with some intention. I'd better tally those things up and live with the end in mind. This idea of life being short and living with purpose is something we see all throughout Scripture. If you look at the book of James, James calls our life a vapor. It's like here 1 minute, it's gone just as quick as a vapor, like on a cold day. David in Psalm 39 prays to God, says, Lord, make me know my end. He's not saying this like, God, let me know how I'm going to die. He's saying, hey, God, make me think about the end of my life so that I can live with purpose, so that I can live with intention. In Ecclesiastes chapter 7, this is a real upper here. He says, it's better to go in the house of mourning than the house of feasting, for this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. He says, hey, if you really want perspective on life, if you want wisdom in life, you know where you should go? Not to a party, but to a funeral. Because when you go to a funeral, that makes you think. The idea is this. The way God has called us to live is to live our life backwards, to think about the end, to live with the end in mind. When I'm gone, what will I be known for? And work towards the things that matter. This is where wisdom shows up, because at that point, like if you've ever spent time, and I've had the privilege of knowing people that are dying or near the end of their life, man, you want to talk about a clarity of purpose and focusing on the things that matter. It's those people, right? That's where wisdom is found. You could call this farsightedness. So one thing that's super interesting is if you look at 1 John, in 1 John, the author, John, he calls sin nearsightedness. I think that's a very interesting way to refer to sin. He talks about the sin of nearsightedness. It's almost this idea that like sin comes from not looking very far into the future. It's very immediate, right? It's this nearsightedness because I think the reality is if most of us realized how this sin would end, if most of us realized the destruction this sin would do to our relationships, if most of us realized the destruction that sin would do to society, we wouldn't do it, right? But we have this incapability of looking beyond the immediate and avoiding that sin. And so the opposite of nearsightedness is farsightedness, right? It's like looking with the end in mind. Because farsightedness and looking later on at your life actually leads to wisdom. It leads to a place where you're very intentional in your decisions. What do you want to be known for? And so at the end of the day, Psalm 90 is actually a psalm that's calling us to live with the end in mind and to live each and every day with intention and to live each and every day with purpose. The way I think of it, just kind of for like a cheesy illustration, is I've had the privilege to go to Europe twice with my family. And I'm a very light packer, and my worst nightmare is being overseas and having lost luggage. Like, I don't want to have to go buy things in another country and spend money. It's already expensive just to get to another country. And then now I got to buy a whole new wardrobe while I'm here, So both times I've gone, my wife and I have decided we're going to stick with carry-on bags. Like, we're just going to make it work. And I'm not talking about go to Europe for 3 or 4 days, a quick weekend in Europe where you can fit everything in a carry-on bag. It's like, how can we go for a few weeks in a carry-on bag? And this was easier for me, but not easy. Very difficult for my wife. Fitting everything into a carry-on bag is like her worst nightmare. Like if mine is having lost luggage, hers is like having a carry-on bag and fitting everything for a few weeks in it. It's not easy for her. And when you have to live out of a very small, and you got to realize these aren't American carry-ons. Like luggage compartments in European airlines are much smaller and fit much smaller bags. So these are small bags. And if you're deciding I'm going to live out of this, you got to be very intentional. You have to be very intentional with the stuff that you choose. How can I make this work? I guess I'm going to bring this outfit and I'm going to bring these pants to fit with it, and we're just going to like make it work with just a few articles of clothing. Can I bring a hairdryer, or do I have to hope and pray the Airbnb has a hairdryer in it? Like all of these are questions that you have to wrestle with. Everything had better serve a purpose, or else your bag's going to not fit in the compartment. And living life with intention is a little bit like that. You have to be very purposeful, because if you're not purposeful, what you're going to be is you're going to always be a slave to what feels like an emergency, what feels like an immediate need. Because life is just one series of people yelling at you after another. You need this. You need to do this. You need to experience this. You need to see this. You need this thing in your life. You need to buy this. You need to fill in the blank. Or you're at work and you're constantly like, it's your coworker, right? That's always like, hey, can you do this for me? Hey, I didn't get this done. Hey, I didn't meet this deadline. And now all of a sudden their emergency becomes your emergency. And your life can just be one series of reacting after another, after another, after another. And it can feel like you're just putting out crisis for the rest of your life. And it can be really hard to live with purpose. And it can be really hard to live with intention. The other thing is it's also really easy to look at passages like this and really overthink it and start to feel really guilty. Like, am I doing enough? Am I accomplishing enough with my life? It's easy to just look at the everyday stuff that we find ourselves in and be like, does this matter? Am I even doing anything that matters? And I want to tell you that's actually not why I'm here this morning. I'm not here to tell you that the stuff in your life that you feel like might be pulling you away from your purpose doesn't matter. It's to tell you that the very stuff in your life that you might feel like is pulling you away from your purpose is the stuff that matters the most. That's what I want to talk about. Because I think where a lot of Christians go with passages like number your days, measure your days, live with intention and purpose, they go to a place of guilt and they go to a place of shame. Like, if you haven't given up everything to go overseas, are you really a good Christian? Like, that's kind of like most Christian books. You're just not enough. You're not doing enough. You're not good enough. You should feel guilty about the life that you have. You should feel guilty about your job. You should feel guilty about having kids. You should feel guilty about not giving up everything all the time. And that's not where I'm going. And this is why I believe Moses actually goes where he goes next. He doubles down on exactly the stuff that is most important. He doesn't actually leave us wondering, what are the things that I should measure my days and think about? Read verse 16 with me. He says, let your work be shown to your servants and your glorious power to their children. So he's like, hey, let's show your work to generations. Let's be generational. And then he says, let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and establish the work of our hands. Yes, establish the work of our hands. This is the important thing that I want to get across today, and that is this, that nothing is wasted, okay? Your life is not wasted. The stuff that you feel like might sidetrack your goals and the things that you want for your life, it's not wasted time on this earth. If God is a dwelling place for all generations, outside of time, and if God is working his will out through Jesus Christ, and God is working the redemption of all things, and if our life is fleeting, that should cause us to live with purpose, but what should that purpose look like? Well, he says right here, he's praying for God's favor on what he does, and he's working. He's just working in the everyday life and asking God, can you just bless this? Can you just bless what I'm doing? Can you just bless the work of my hands? And he's asking God to establish it. It's really not that complicated. God's going to work everything out in his time, and what we do matters. Even the mundane stuff that you do that feels like it might be a waste of time matters. We parent, we neighbor, we make schedules, and we pay bills. We go to work, we sit in an office, and we commit that stuff to God. God, you can do more with my everyday faithfulness than I can with eternity. And I know there are a lot of areas of our lives where we can really feel that things are mundane at home, at work, at school, in our parenting life. You might look at that stuff as frustrations for you, and it might be frustrating. You might view some of the stuff as setbacks, and it might be setbacks. But God is at work in all of it. And God just might want to establish your work through just your ordinary, everyday, faithful living. Trying to be a good parent, trying to be a good employee, trying to be a good neighbor. God steps into those mundane things all the time, and he uses those things for a purpose. The conversations that you have aren't wasted. The daily decisions that you have to make about where to eat and what to buy and how to get your kids where they need to be on time, none of that stuff is wasted. God will even use the setbacks in your life to accomplish his purposes because he's on a greater time frame than you are, and he doesn't just have 70 or 80 years to accomplish it. I mean, maybe God is asking you to pack up and do something crazy. Move overseas. I would never knock that stuff. But also, maybe God is just asking you to be faithful where you are and to code it in prayer. Maybe that's what God wants from you. Being faithful in your job, working hard, taking joy in the work of your hands every single day, keeping you from, instead of viewing our work many times like most of us do, which is keeping me from what I really want. What if work is the thing you're supposed to do? Right? Just thinking through it that way. Being faithful as a parent. Sometimes it's really hard in the day-to-day grind of parenting to see what you're doing and think this matters, but it is a great thing to just parent children in the eyes of God. It's an amazing calling on all of our lives. Maybe God is asking you to find value in everyday things because the everyday things do matter to God. And maybe you are building something beautiful that you don't even realize. So don't underestimate the power of the small stuff. And so my encouragement to you this morning is to live with eternity in mind. And a lot of times your mind is going to immediately go to big things. There's nothing wrong with that. Be a dreamer. I am a dreamer. Have big goals. But don't view the everyday as minutia that doesn't matter, because it does matter to God. And I would argue it's very important. What if God is working in your life right now with whatever it is that you're facing that feels like it's nothing? This can't have a purpose behind it. This can't have a plan behind it. I want to make this really practical for you, okay? I know there are a lot of areas where it's hard to live with eternity in mind, but what would it look like if you worked like the stuff that you work at actually matters? What would that look like for you? What if you went to your job with eternity in mind every day? What if you parented with eternity in mind? What if you neighbored with eternity in mind? And living with eternity in mind might mean doing something radical, but it doesn't always mean doing something radical. Sometimes it's about trusting God to work in those small, ordinary steps of obedience that you take every single day. So what does that look like for you? I want to give you a simple step to take, okay? I want to encourage you. You can even do this right now at your seat. Take a second and maybe think of one area of your life where you struggle to see purpose, where you struggle to see, does this matter in my life? And write that down. Just write it down. You can write it down at your seat right now. And then I would encourage you over the next week or so to just pray over that one thing, the one area of your life where you struggle to see purpose. Pray over it. and ask God to number your days and give you a heart of wisdom in that area. Just watch. Watch what God does. Watch how God helps you to live with intention and purpose in that area that might even seem insignificant. It might be conversations you have at work where you're like, wow, I had no idea that I was making an impact on this person at my work, and now I'm having great conversations with them that I would have normally had without even thinking about. But because I'm praying about it and it's on my mind, I have intention behind these conversations. Maybe it's your neighbors, right? For me, a lot of times, this is one of my favorites, is when you're putting your kids to bed and you're like, I just want to go watch some Netflix or something. And that's when they ask the biggest questions. It's like, oh, now I get to sit here at like 10 o'clock at night. I can't tell if they're stalling or if they actually care about this, but it's time to have this really deep conversation when everything in me wants to just be like, go to bed, right? Like, those things are important. It might be a moment of just peace in your day where you feel peace at the situation and circumstance that you're in. It might just be some clarity on perspective, some things you had never thought about with the stuff that you're going through. As I've wrestled with this tension in my own life many times, sometimes it's about what does God want from me in ministry? Sometimes it's my personal goals that I feel like I've gotten behind in or lost or whatever. Could be my future. What I've started to notice in my own life is a lot of times this comes from a pattern that I'm always living every day by what's next and never able to appreciate what's now in my life. And then you start to question, well, maybe what I'm doing isn't enough. Or maybe I need to do something more. Maybe I need to do something more extraordinary than what I'm doing. And again, I'm a dreamer, so I'm not saying I don't have big dreams or big goals for my life. Those things are great. But I will say this, I'm a completely different person than I was in my 20s, all right? Being in my 40s now, something shifted in me in recent years. And I feel like it's a really important shift that isn't talked about a lot. And I'm not talking about the neck pain that I wake up with that I used to not. I'm talking about starting to number my days. I'm thinking about starting to actually think about the brevity of life and starting to think honestly about my own mortality, something that had never crossed my mind until I hit midlife. And then you start to think about, man, if I'm numbering my days and if I'm living with intention, what does that look like for me? You start watching your kids grow up, start looking at your marriage and how important that relationship is in your life. And I realize, man, these are the things that matter. These are the things that I should be striving for and living with eternity in mind for. And the best thing that I have to offer those things sometimes is just my everyday faithfulness to them, my faithfulness to parenting, my faithfulness to my wife, my faithfulness to my job. I can't underestimate just doing the stuff that feels so mundane when you're young and doing it with eternity in mind and doing it with a purpose. At the end of the day, I want to be a good dad. I want to pass my faith on to the next generation. I want my kids to love Jesus and to raise kids that love Jesus. And that's not a setback. That's not something that doesn't matter or is mundane or is minutia. It's super important to me. I want to be a good husband, right? I want to love my wife and have a great relationship with her. I want to step into eternity and be like, do you remember the amazing life that we had on earth and all of the memories that we made together and how hard it was and yet God worked? Did amazing things through our marriage. I just want to love God and be faithful to Him in the everyday stuff. I want to pass my faith on well to others. And I want to commit my work to the Lord so that if He wants to do something that I didn't expect or do something major or do something massive or crazy in my life, that I'm available and open for that too. But that realization, that stopping to think about my own mortality for just a few minutes has changed a lot for me in the last few years. One of the things it's done is it's freed me from the pressure of constantly having to look ahead and wonder what's next without appreciating what's going on in my life right now and the very season that I'm in right now. And it's given me the ability to see beauty and purpose in just the everyday grind, the everyday life. It's reminding me that God is always present, God is always active, and He is eternal in the little moments that face me every single day. And so I wonder what it would look like just for you as a church. If you were to live every day as ordinary people that are extraordinarily faithful to God, what would that look like for you? What if we embraced our everyday work as, you know what, I wake up and I commit whatever work I have to God every single day. I put that in His hands and say, God, I'm going to my job today, and I may just be typing transcripts up all day, like the Feels like it doesn't matter, but you know what? I'm committing this to you, and I'm going to see what happens. God, I'm going to wake up today, and I'm going to commit my parenting to you. I'm going to commit my work to you, and let's just see what happens and where this goes. Imagine the impacts on our society if parents were just committed to being godly parents who raise godly children. That shouldn't be controversial, but it seems so controversial, right? Like it seems like that's not normal in our society. That's a revolutionary way to live. Imagine the impact on society if we did incredible work at our jobs and worked every day as if the stuff we go do every day for 8 hours matters because we're serving a great God. And we are committed to our work because we are committed to Him. Imagine how that would shift society. Imagine how that would shift our perspective. Imagine the everyday faithfulness, even in the wilderness. I think that's where the extraordinary things actually show up in our lives, where we least expect it. This is one of the reasons I love taking communion. Like, think about this. I don't know about you, but I take communion every week. It becomes part of this kind of routine thing that I just do. Right? Like this just is a everyday routine thing. And yet God has taken the every week routine thing to teach us and to make a special set apart holy meal for us. Think about what we do when we take communion. We take everyday items, bread and wine, bread and juice, stuff that we need to just survive. We take these everyday things, and what God does is He redeems those everyday things and sets them apart for a holy purpose. This is what communion does. He sets those things apart to remind us of what Jesus did on the cross and His redemptive purposes. Yes, so that we can be saved. Yes, so that we can experience eternity with Him, but also He came to redeem the ordinary things too. He came to redeem our everyday lives. And so we take this meal of everyday things, and we are reminded that God takes the everyday, ordinary things, and He sets them apart, and He makes them holy, and He does something great with them. And so as you come to the table today during communion, I would encourage you to remember that Jesus does redeem our souls, but He doesn't just redeem our souls. He redeems our everyday life too. He redeems all of us. And communion shows us that your everyday things matter to God. Okay? So I invite you during this time, we're going to sing. I invite you to pray, take communion at your seat, and sing praises to the God who takes us and redeems our work and wants to do extraordinary things through our everyday faithfulness. Let's pray. God, teach us to number our days. Teach us to live with the end in mind, not as a form of escapism of our everyday lives, but living our everyday lives with intention, knowing that what we do matters, that our jobs matter, our daily lives matter, our dreams matter, our goals matter, our desires matter, our parenting matters. Where we live matters. God, every single decision that we make matters to you, and it serves a greater purpose than we could even envision or imagine. And so help us to be people that commit our everyday lives and commit our work to you. And God, if there's anybody in here this morning that is struggling with purpose, God, I ask that you would give them a sense of clarity on who you are and a sense of peace. God, for those of us that have more on our minds and more dreams than we have time on this earth, God, I ask that you would give us a sense of peace and a sense of renewed passion for the things that you've put on our hearts, knowing that the end isn't actually the end, that you have wired us for eternity because we have eternity to experience. And some of the things that we may not get to even accomplish in this life, we get to accomplish in the next. So God, thank you that you are a God that redeems those purposes. And for anyone in here that doesn't know you, God, that hasn't put their faith and trust in what you accomplished on the cross so that we could experience eternity with you, I ask that today would be the day that they choose to follow you and give you their life and see that you are totally worth it and you redeem the everyday things for us. It's in your name I pray and ask all of these things. Amen.